I'm so pleased to welcome our speaker this morning, Marcelino Ford-Livene. Marcelino is Managing Director and Head of the Executive Residence Program in Intel Capital, the corporate venture capital arm of Intel Corporation. Since 1991, Intel Capital has invested in over almost $13 billion in over 1,600 companies worldwide. And their 700 plus portfolio companies have gone public or participated in merger. Marcelino manages assets in Intel Capital's global portfolio of companies and lead a team that delivers strategic business development, sales and marketing, operations, and communications advice to support entrepreneurs just like yourselves. He also provides leadership to Intel Capital's diversity and inclusion initiatives, outreach efforts, investments, and company building activities. Marcelino is here to discuss how to develop culture as a competitive advantage for startups. So please type your questions in chat. We're going to open up the floor in the last 10 minutes to get your questions in. So turning it over to you, Marcelino, please take it away.
Thanks, Victoria. And first of all, I want to say right off the bat, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And congratulations to everyone on all of your accomplishments. It's awesome. So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about culture as a competitive advantage. And why do we even care or even talk about this topic? Well, I think your stakeholders care. And in my role at Intel, one of the things I do is I work very closely with founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, and their management teams. And the Executive in Residence program is really designed for Intel to add value to our portfolio companies by literally parachuting in Intel senior leaders into those companies where we can make a difference. And it's all about rolling up your sleeves and helping great teams get successful outcomes. So my experience, what I found is there's a difference between young companies that think about culture as a competitive advantage and companies that are so focused on going to market and getting that product market fit and all that good stuff that they kind of overlook some of those intangibles. So I want to talk about 6 areas around culture as a competitive advantage and what that means. So when you think about culture, culture can mean, the environment in the workplace. And does that environment in the workplace foster a notion of inclusion? Does it foster a notion of community? And a lot of times we hear these topics and we read about them, but we don't always know how to implement them. So I want to talk a little bit about these 6 areas. Now, increased workplace diversity could actually potentially earn your company more money. And what do I mean by that? And what do I mean by diversity? So think of diversity as being asked to go to the party. Everybody's included to go to the party. But inclusion is actually being asked to dance. So you may be in the room, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're participating actively in bringing your true self to the effort at hand. There's been a lot of writing on this topic, and Harvard Business Review has some great articles on increasing workplace diversity. But having a more diverse set of employees means that you have a diverse set of skills, which could result in an office that functions better. In fact, there's a study that says that there have been a number of things looking at diversity of performance, but they don't always use the measures of performance that economists might prefer. But net, the research suggests that more inclusive teams that have that diversity of thought and diversity of skill sets are actually able to perform better, which could actually add to the bottom line. So that's one thing to think about. And while we're on the topic of diversity, let's talk about gender diversity. Gender diversity, bottom line, just helps women advance in underrepresented fields like engineering and other STEM-related areas. And despite the increase in workplace diversity, unfortunately, women continue to be underrepresented in key business areas. And it's clear from these numbers that gender diversity should be a top priority for just all modern businesses, whether they're publicly traded companies or privately held or even startups. Gender inclusion from the top corporate levels to the bottom will help boost women's involvement and representation in the business community, as well as in STEM and highly technical fields. So essentially, there's a large pool of skilled female employees that are consistently being overlooked. And so that's a resource that obviously should not be wasted. Now, another thing about culture and this notion of inclusion centers on the fact that inclusive companies actually report higher levels of employee engagement. And again, I'll point to a Harvard Business Review study that looked at workplace diversity and corporate inclusion. And it said that they should go hand in hand. A broadly diverse staff or management team alone doesn't mean ultimate success for diverse employees. But this article notes that inclusion means that working with people of color, women, disabled, LGBTQ individuals to unlock their talents and develop them into valuable business associates actually adds value. In fact, the research found that employees with inclusive managers are 1.3 times more likely to feel that their innovative potential is unlocked. And let's be clear, it's all about unlocking everyone's innovative potential in an early stage company in a startup environment. And employees that are able to bring their whole selves to work are 42% likely, 42% likely, less likely to say that they intend to leave that job within 1 year. And if you think about mentorship and sponsorship inside your company, and it's never too early to start thinking about that. Those companies that actively try to sponsor and mentor employees are 62% more likely to have asked for and have received a promotion. And so these are things to think about as you're building your company, as you're growing your company, and you're adding more employees. Now, what are some of the downsides if you don't think about an inclusive culture as a competitive advantage? Well, challenges in the workplace, particularly around diversity and inclusion, may trigger some nasty PR problems. Recently, Uber faced broadly reported claims of gender discrimination, and these damaging reports led to the resignation of many of the company's top talent, including their former president. Employment and PR experts state that Uber's lack of diversity became a high-profile problem for the company. And as your company grows, and as you hopefully realize that exit strategy, let's say you're on the path to IPO, these are things that you're absolutely going to have to think about. And companies that publicly deal with diversity challenges face PR and media headaches. So again, you want to also look at, what's the risk of not being inclusive and not thinking about how to really build a rich culture. Another thing to think about is, workplace inclusion and diversity reflects modern demographics. Broadly diverse companies reflect the makeup of the population at large. Modern companies should strive to adapt to the changing US and international demographics. And keeping pace with societal changes demonstrates to your customers, your clients, your business colleagues, and your employees that your company is open to advancement and keeping pace with modern values. I think the last thing I want to say in this area is, inclusion and having an inclusive culture just fosters a sense of community. I kind of touched upon this earlier, but let me put a finer point on it. Workplace inclusion and diversity is important for those intangible factors in business, such as creating a sense of community and belonging and connectivity between the employees, the teams, and the company's core values and the mission. Connected employees are enthusiastic and they're committed. And I think the successful companies that know how to do this effectively know that a strong sense of community in the workplace can inspire their employees to do their best and boost overall job satisfaction. I want to give you an example, a real world example that I faced actually earlier this year in working with one of our portfolio companies that was really struggling with this notion of culture. And it goes something like this. Due to the pandemic, this team of 50 people in a cybersecurity company, pre-pandemic, they've been used to just working really closely, sitting next to each other, and they had a really collegial environment. They ate lunch together. They, late nights in the office, had dinner together on the weekends. They hung out and they worked. But due to the pandemic, they all had to work from home. And so that sense of inclusion and really being able to bounce ideas off of each other in a spontaneous manner just wasn't there. But at the same time, the company was growing. And so some of those director level engineers were promoted to VPs of engineering, or directors in other areas were promoted, which meant that they had to now hire people underneath them and really grow this company, which is not the easiest thing to do when you're trying to do this virtually. I mean, trust me, Intel struggles with this, and we're no different than a smaller company. Everybody's faced with this challenge. But the critical thing to note is that what one of my executives in residence was able to do was work with the management team to help them figure out how to develop a sense of community, develop a way to mentor not only the newly minted VPs, but also figure out a way to onboard a variety of different employees and help them feel connected. And figuring out how to maintain that sense of community in a virtual environment actually helped them increase their productivity by almost 300%. Not only that, they achieved their ARR target after the first 6 of the month, after the first quarter, and they're on their way right now to achieve their ARR target for the front half of 2021. So, other thing to note is they implemented an employee survey to really find out how managers were doing. And when we first started working with them, people weren't really enthusiastic. But when we actually started working with managers and we worked with the C-suite and we actually started to help them figure out how to foster a better sense of community and inclusion, their scores went up after the project was over. So I believe that cultural inclusion and really thinking about your culture really can add value. And for all those reasons that I've listed, there's a lot of good, compelling business reasons for thinking about this. It's never too early to focus on how you can improve the culture and foster a sense of belonging in your company. I know, Victoria, I've said a lot. Maybe it's time to open it up for some questions.
Yeah. Please raise your hand or type it in chat. But I do have, there, I've got Iwan from, please say your name and then introduce your company and state your question. Iwan?
Hello, hi, Marcelino. My name is Iwan. I am the founder of Manuf. My question is, so I'm based in Indonesia, in Bali, where equality, inclusion, it's still how to say, it's not as easy to implement. Even though we try to implement as many empowering women as much as possible, there are times where the opposite sex is how to say, like the soft like micro discrimination, where it is harder to enforce. If it is in maybe in Europe and America, it's clear cut. You're doing micro,
right, microaggressions, micro inequities. Yes.
How do you do that in a country like Indonesia? Can you recommend a book, or do you have something like that where we can tackle that?
Sure. I would say that, first of all, it's a great question, and I think you correctly point out that different parts of the world have different points of view on this topic, and everybody's point of view and worldview is different. But I think if I were you, the place that I would look is to how to work internally to educate your team around those internal biases that they may be bringing to the table. And I think that starts with focusing on, as you pointed out, the implicit bias that they may hold. They may have a bias against a particular gender or a particular group. And they may say that they don't have that bias, but really they do. And being able to understand that bias exists and being able to tease out examples and have conversations about that is the first step. Before I think any company can really truly embrace this notion of community, you have to have conversations. And they're not going to be the easiest conversations, I can tell you that right now. But hopefully, as you think about how to educate and inform your team around the goal and the values that you're trying to instill in this company and why it makes sense from an international perspective, that may hopefully unlock the ability for them to open up, explain why they have various views, respecting their views, and then trying to introduce concepts and maybe a strategy and tactics that they can use to think outside of their box and bring that fresh perspective. Now, I will say it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. But I found that those companies that are really effective at doing this are smart enough to have this be a board level decision at the top. That commitment starts at the top, from the board, from the CEO, from the C-suite. And this is something that we are going to work on and try and implement.
Sorry, can I follow up with that?
Sure.
So one of the problems that we're having in Indonesia is, for example, is this. So there's my employees. There's a line of hierarchy that I don't put it to them, but they put it themselves for me. There's a hierarchy. So whatever I tell them, they will say, yes, I'll do it. Yes, I'll do it. But it's not internalized. There is no way that, I mean, like if I tell them something and then they don't agree, then normally you would argue, right? These people, they wouldn't argue with you. They would just do it. But I know it will boil over at one point, which already happens from time to time. That micro aggression becomes vengeance, and that's the part where I like how do you do with that in Intel, for example, in third world country, if you have to say.
Yeah. So I can tell you that first of all, I think you're spot on in unpacking what really is the crux of the matter. It's people. In order to do this, it requires people to be able to understand and actually do it. One of the things that we've done is we've held managers accountable. And when I said that this is a top-down initiative at Intel, it is a top-down initiative. Our CEO and our board have said that we are going to do better. In fact, one of the things that we've said is that we're going to have full representation in our company based on market availability. And we've held managers accountable for and holding them to that in terms of the makeup of their teams and retention, progression, and promotion of and hiring of our employee base. I think what I would say, and happy to talk to you about this offline in more detail, as I think that I would say is, it requires a leap of faith and it requires accountability. Pocket vetoes, that's what I call it, situations where employees say yes, but really their heart's not in it and are kind of internally making a veto of the decision, are things that I think you can work through. But it all starts with having those conversations and really giving them the tool set to be able to overcome any internal apprehensions that they may have.
Right. Any other questions? So, Marcelino, what is the difference between diverse and inclusive? You use that analogy really, really well. So, I want you to repeat that again.
Sure. So you can think of, or I like to think of, and I don't know, I can't take credit for this analogy, but I think of diversity as someone's having a party. Let's say my kids I have twins. They just finished fourth grade. So let's think of my kids. So they're in the fourth grade, and one of the kids is having a birthday party, and so they invite everyone in the class to their birthday party. So that means that everyone in the class is going to be at this party, and that's a very diverse group at the party. But let's say that at this party, there's swimming. And only out of the 20 kids at this party, only 15 on the invite were invited to bring their swimming trunks so that they could swim in the pool. So 15 of the kids actually showed up. They've got their towels, they've got their swimming trunks, and they're all ready to have fun in the pool. But the other 5 kids, they're at the party, but they can't get in the pool because they didn't bring swimming trunks. That's inclusion. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're invited to the birthday party, but if you're not able to swim in the pool, you're not included. Inclusion would mean all 20 kids are invited to the birthday party, and all 20 kids in that invite, there was a note saying, oh, by the way, there's going to be swimming, bring your swimming trunks and bring your towels. And that's the difference. And so those 5 kids that aren't able to swim feel left out. Yeah, they're there, but are they really able to fully participate in the activities that the community is involved in?
Yeah, that's a great analogy for everybody to understand. I've got a question from Yingting Wang. Yingting, do you want to ask that question direct?
Hi, Marcelino. This is Inting from Proteona. So for rapidly growing startup companies, we're all very idealistic and we pledge to be open, to be inclusive. But when the company grows to, say, 20, 30 people, how do you maintain that culture at that stage? I wonder what's your suggestion and advice on that?
Sure. I think, and this is my personal view, I found companies that have gone from 20 to 30 employees to 100 employees turn around and say, oh my gosh, we need manager leader training. And here's where it typically falls down. So a company, about 20 employees, probably doesn't have a chief people officer, right? And they don't start thinking about a chief people officer until they're really now starting to bring on talent. Maybe the VCs that are backing them are helping them find talent. But in a period of rapid growth, they really don't have the processes and structure in place to really think about how to foster that sense of community and how to have a framework and an approach for not only hiring, but also coaching and mentoring and giving those managers the tool sets that they need. I've seen some companies that don't have a person in place hire a consultant to help them at least think through some of these issues. I've seen some venture capital firms actually place an EIR into the company to help them work through and navigate some of these issues and get them to a point where they're able to now go from 20, 30 to 40, 50 employees. But from my perspective, I don't think it's too early to start thinking about that. And I would encourage you with your senior leadership team, your senior management team, to hold a meeting and to really kind of flesh out, okay, what are some of the things that we want to have in place from a cultural perspective as we build out our company, and really try to set time out, maybe twice a month to really focus and track your progress towards that. That means that when you do get to that point where you have more employees on board, you're now able to kind of look at those metrics and those key KPIs and see how well you're doing towards building a more vibrant culture.
I got a follow-up question to that. How are you tracking this? How do you know when the program is working?
Oh, I think my favorite is actually employee surveys. That's the first thing I do. Think of employees as your customers, if you will. If you care about their well-being, if you care about their ability to do their best work, you're going to ask them for feedback. And you're going to ask them informally. You can ask them via an anonymous survey, but you have to communicate with your employees. You cannot have a us versus them mentality. That's not going to be healthy.
Great. And I got a question from Priyanka Srinivas from the Live Green Company. Do you want to open up your video and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Marcelo.
Hi.
Marcelino. I'm so sorry for the mispronunciation.
It's okay.
But I think I had this realization moment last week when I saw a lot of the Pride Month going on and a lot of companies changing their icons. So I thought that was a great thing to do, and I sent this message to my team saying that, hey guys, I think we support the cause and we should also change our logo. Then the very next day, I saw an article which actually triggered this in me, which said, you have to earn your rights to put the rainbow, where you actually have to contribute to this community, make a difference and a change, and not really use it as a branding or a marketing initiative. So when I started to look deep and say that, oh guys, we want to inculcate a culture of inclusiveness, we want to do all that. But I'm so scared about, or I'm not sure, when do we do it organically and when do we do it by process? Because when I went back to discuss it with my team, they told me, guess what, Pri, in all our communication that we sent, we do have people from the LGBT community. So we are actually doing it. But that was lack of awareness on my side. So I'm always confused. How do you show inclusiveness? Is it organic? Should it be process oriented? Because when we discuss with anybody working with our company, we take that person as a human and not really put any of these filters. but how do we do it as we scale and grow, and how do we keep that to our core?
No, it's a question. That's a good question. There's a lot there. My fast answer is understand the concept of being an ally. Being an ally of this cause means that you support it. Companies that have the logo and they change their logo, they may or may not have really detailed programs in this space. But when I see that, what it represents to me is that they have an appreciation for Pride Month and that they're an ally of diverse groups, particularly the LGBTQ community, and the challenges and the struggles that they face on a daily basis. So recognizing that cause and putting the rainbow up and saying, I stand in support of you, or I have an appreciation, even though I might not be a member of that group, I have a sensitivity and appreciation towards the challenges and the struggles that you have. I think that's when I see that rainbow, that's what it represents to me. And I hope that internally in that organization, there's at least a sense of that. And it's not just a branding exercise.
Great. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're coming up to the end of the hour, and I want to thank Marcelino for joining us today to share your wise counsel and help us really unpack this important conversation. This topic that is should be really integrated into the core values of each company, right? How we think about diversity, equity, inclusion. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Ford, your organization, for your generous support of XTC. We really appreciate your input and advocating for the important mission that we're pushing forward. Thank you, all of you, Startup Founders, for joining this, and I will see you at the next session.